A single screw smaller than your thumbnail can destroy a $60 million jet engine. A 2-second miscalculation on a steam catapult can send a pilot into the ocean instead of the sky. On an aircraft carrier flight deck, making mistakes get funerals. The Navy's official rulebook covers operations, but the unwritten rules, the ones whispered between bunks, learned through near-death mistakes and inherited from sailors who paid for them in blood, those are what actually keep 5,000 people alive on the most dangerous 4.5 acres on Earth.
Being at sea for a long period of time, it does get stressful sometimes.
These codes decide who earns trust, when you're allowed to speak, and why a 19-year-old in a brown jersey sometimes outranks an officer twice his age. They were born from disasters that killed hundreds and shaped by traditions older than the Navy itself. Today, we're breaking down every single one of them. Let's get into it. The first ritual every carrier sailor learns has nothing to do with jets, weapons, or combat. It's about screws. Every morning, before a single aircraft launches, hundreds of sailors line up shoulder to shoulder and walk the entire flight deck, eyes locked on the ground, searching for bolts, safety pins, torn wire, a coin that slipped from someone's pocket, anything that could get sucked into the intake of a jet engine spinning at thousands of RPMs. The Navy calls it the FOD walk down, which stands for foreign object damage. And if that sounds dramatic for a missing bolt, consider this: the USS Baton skipped proper FOD procedures once. Just once, 5 jet engines destroyed. The repair bill, $30 million, for debris that could have fit in the palm of your hand. So the walk down isn't casual, it's sacred. The first line moves from bow to stern, eyes down, bodies tight. A second line follows 10 feet behind, catching what the first line missed. Then they turn around and do it again. Twice a day. Every day at sea. No rank gets you out of it. Officers walk beside cooks. Pilots walk beside mechanics. On the FOD line, everyone is equal because the deck doesn't care about your pay grade. And this is where the unwritten rules take over. If a tool goes missing, a wrench, a screwdriver, or even a flashlight, flight operations stop. Every aircraft stays chained to the deck until that tool is found. The item gets traced back to the exact sailor who checked it out. Every toolbox is inventoried before a shift, during a shift, and after a shift. If your count doesn't match, you don't leave. Nobody does. The unwritten code is simple. You never hide a lost tool. Ever. You report it the second you notice, even if it means the entire ship grinds to a halt because of you. Because the alternative is worse. That wrench gets caught in jet blast, turns into a projectile across the deck, gets ingested into an engine during launch, and now a $60 million aircraft is in the ocean, or a pilot is dead, or both. Now let me tell you about a video that every sailor in the Navy has to watch before they ever step foot on a carrier. It's called Trial by Fire. 20 minutes of real footage showing what happens when a flight deck turns into hell. And it comes from one day that changed the Navy forever. July 29th, 1967. USS Forrestal. Gulf of Tonkin. A stray electrical surge fires a Zuni rocket across a fully loaded flight deck. It slams into a fuel tank. Jet fuel sprays everywhere and ignites. Chief Gerald Ferrier sprints toward the fire in 54 seconds with a handheld extinguisher, trying to cool a 1,000-pound bomb sitting in the middle of the flames. He almost makes it. Then the bomb detonates. Ferrier dies instantly. The trained firefighting team is wiped out in the first blast. 8 more explosions follow. Untrained sailors grab hoses and charge into the fire with raw courage but zero technique. Some spraying foam while others wash it away with seawater without realizing it. 134 sailors die. 161 are wounded. The investigation reveals the most terrifying truth of all. Most of the crew had never been trained to fight a fire. The Navy rewrote everything after that day. Firefighting training went from specialized teams to every person aboard. Damage control drills became daily, and the unwritten rule that came out of it is something every carrier sailor carries like a second heartbeat. When the alarm sounds, everyone fights. Cook, pilot, reactor tech, 18-year-old rookie, nobody watches. There are no spectators on a burning ship. That's the Forrestal rule. Every fighter pilot in the Navy would tell you the same thing. Taking off from a carrier is terrifying, but landing on one? That's where careers end and legends are made. Think about what's being asked here. You're flying a 48,000-pound aircraft toward a strip of steel barely 1,000 feet long. The deck is pitching, rolling, sometimes both. It's 2 in the morning. You can't see the horizon. All you've got is a tiny amber light called the meatball telling you whether you're on glide path or about to slam into the back of the ship. And you have roughly 18 seconds to either catch a wire or miss everything. Miss everything, and that's called a bolter. Your hook skips all 4 arresting wires, wheels slam the deck, and you firewall the throttle to claw back into the sky. Bolters happen. But during night operations, when the deck is invisible and your instruments are the only thing between you and the ocean, a bolter shakes something loose inside you that's hard to put back. Now standing at the edge of that landing area watching every approach is the person who might matter more than the pilot's own skill, the landing signal officer. Nicknamed Paddles. That nickname goes back to the 1920s. Commander Kenneth Whiting stood on the deck of the USS Langley, the Navy's first carrier. Pilots kept coming in too high, fast, and crooked. So Whiting grabbed 2 white sailor hats from the guys next to him and started waving signals at incoming biplanes. That improvisation, one man waving hats on a steel deck, became an entire profession. LSOs traded hats for colored paddles, then radio handsets and light systems. But the name stuck, Paddles. Today, every squadron's LSOs stand on a small platform on the port side and talk each aircraft down. They see what the pilot can't. Drift left, sink rate increasing, power, more power, wave off. And here's what makes Paddles untouchable. Every single landing gets graded. Every one. Rookie on your first cruise or commanding officer with 3,000 flight hours, doesn't matter. Paddles grade your approach and that score goes up on the greenie board. The greenie board hangs in every squadron's ready room for every pilot to see. Your name on the left. Colored dots next to it. Green, you nailed it. Yellow, average. Brown, safe but ugly, nicknamed the turd. Red, a cut pass. Dangerous. Something went seriously wrong. That board follows you like a credit score. Pilots glance at it every time they walk in. They know who's stacking greens. The board speaks for itself. And at the end of each grading period, awards come out during a ceremony called Foxhole Follies. Best landing average gets top hook. The bottom, they get roasted in front of everyone. The unwritten rule is carved in stone. When Paddles debriefs your approach, what went wrong, where you drifted, why your grade dropped, you shut up and listen. Because Paddles is trying to make sure the next time you fly that approach in zero visibility with fuel running low, you come back alive. There's a spot on every aircraft carrier that doesn't appear in any recruitment video. No one talks about it during orientation, but every sailor who's ever served on a carrier knows exactly where it is and what it means. It's called Vultures Row, a narrow outdoor walkway on the carrier's island, the tower above the flight deck. From up there, you can see everything. Jets launching off the bow, recovery cycles slamming aircraft onto steel, ocean stretching until it swallows the sky. There are no duties assigned to Vultures Row, no official reason to be there. That's exactly the point. Vultures Row is where sailors go to breathe, not metaphorically, literally. After days locked inside steel corridors with recycled air, fluorescent lights, and machinery humming through the walls, standing up there with actual wind on your face is the closest thing to freedom on a warship. Sailors don't schedule visits, they just show up, sometimes alone, sometimes in quiet groups where nobody says much. You lean on the railing, watch a sunset you haven't seen in weeks, and for 5 minutes you remember a world still exists beyond this ship. The unwritten rule is understood by everyone. If someone's up there alone, you leave them alone. That sailor might be processing a letter from home, might be carrying something they can't talk about yet, or they might just need to see the horizon. Whatever the reason, you respect it the same way you respect a closed rack curtain. But not every sailor gets Vultures Row. Below the flight deck, there's an entire world of sailors who keep this ship alive and never see the sky for weeks. Reactor technicians monitoring nuclear power plants in windowless rooms, engineers maintaining steam systems and temperatures that turn a workspace into a sauna, cooks preparing 18,000 meals a day under lights that never change. Whether it's noon or midnight, these sailors live on a different clock. Their sense of day and night comes from meal schedules and watch rotations. Some go entire deployments 9 months and can count on one hand the number of times they stood outside in fresh air. They sleep, work, and eat below the waterline. And this is where one of the most important unwritten rules lives. You never complain about the deck to someone who works below it, because the sailor across from you in the chow line would trade every one of those problems for 10 minutes of daylight. This rule is enforced by awareness, by understanding that a carrier has 2 worlds. Both are brutal, but only one lets you see the stars. And the sailors in the other world, they don't complain. They just keep the reactor running, the lights on, and the food coming. Without them, nothing moves. Now, let's talk about the colors. Every sailor on a carrier flight deck wears a colored jersey. The Navy says it's for quick identification in a loud, dangerous environment. And sure, that's part of it. But what nobody tells you is those colors create an unwritten social hierarchy that has nothing to do with rank. It's built entirely on one thing: who the crew actually trusts with their lives. Purple shirts handle jet fuel, aviation fuel so volatile that one spark starts a funeral. Every purple shirt knows that if they slip, the entire ship burns. That pressure makes them calm, unnervingly calm. They don't need to raise their voice to get respect. Everyone around them is still breathing. That's their resume. Red shirts handle ordnance and firefighting, loading live missiles and 2,000-pound bombs onto jets while the deck pitches in rough seas. At night, in the rain, one wrong connection, one drop in the explosion doesn't check your service record first. Nobody jokes around a red shirt while they're working. Yellow shirts direct aircraft movement. When a yellow shirt starts giving hand signals, every conversation on deck ends. You don't argue. You move exactly where they tell you, exactly when they tell you. Green shirts operate the catapults in arresting gear. The catapult officer, the shooter, makes one critical calculation before every launch: steam pressure, wind speed, aircraft weight. Get it right and a $70 million Super Hornet screams into the sky. Get it wrong and that pilot drops off the bow into the ocean. Shooters earn authority through a flawless record. One bad launch and the whispers start. On a carrier, whispers travel faster than jet exhaust. Brown shirts are the plane captains, often barely 19 years old, fresh out of boot camp. But a brown shirt who spent 2 years living next to an F-35 might know more about that jet than an officer with twice the rank. And the pilots know it. They trust their plane captain completely, because that teenager is the first and last person to touch their aircraft every day. On a carrier, experience outranks everything. White shirts include medical personnel and the landing signal officers. The legendary paddles, as we already discussed. The code around them is simple. When an LSO corrects your approach, you don't debate it. You absorb it. Blue shirts are the newest crew members. Still learning, still invisible by design. The unwritten rule is harsh, but it's the reason veterans survived. Mouth shut, eyes open. Prove you can follow before you ever try to lead. Now here's something most civilians have never heard of. Carriers have 2 wardrooms for officers. The former one requires clean uniforms and proper etiquette, but the second, the dirty shirt wardroom, runs by completely different rules. Pilots in sweat-soaked flight suits, deck officers covered in grease, cafeteria style open 24 hours. And in that room, one unwritten rule overrides everything. Your jersey color doesn't matter, your track record does. A 19-year-old plane captain who's never lost a jet gets more quiet respect than a freshly assigned officer who hasn't proven a thing. This one is about how the sailor actually sleeps. They sleep in a compartment with capacity of 60 persons per compartment officially, but in reality, sometimes 80. Rack stacked 3 high, each bunk barely wider than your shoulders, your entire personal space measured in inches. And here's something most people don't know. Sailors actually pay for their meals while deployed. Around $13 a day deducted from their paycheck whether they eat or not. In a space this tight, unwritten rules aren't about comfort. They're about survival. The biggest one, when someone pulls their rack curtain shut, they don't exist. That 6-inch curtain is the only door they have. The only privacy on a ship with 5,000 people. You don't sit on someone's rack without permission. And you absolutely never touch their mail. Mail call is sacred. When that announcement hits, the entire ship's energy shifts. For sailors months from home, a single letter can carry them through a whole week. The unwritten code. Give people space to read. Don't ask questions if someone's upset. And if your care package shows up and your bunkmate got nothing, a real shipmate shares without being asked. Nobody keeps score or expects a thank you. That's just the code. Here's a tradition that sounds completely made up but has been happening on Navy ships for over 400 years. The first time a ship crosses the equator, every sailor who's never crossed before gets a new name, Slimy Pollywog. And the sailors who've already crossed, they become the court of King Neptune. What follows is one of the wildest initiation ceremonies in any military on Earth. Pollywogs get put through a full day of chaos, crawling across the flight deck, getting drenched with fire hoses, kissing the belly of the royal baby, a senior sailor with a greased-up stomach, getting hauled before King Neptune to answer for their crimes against the sea. By the end of it, you're soaked, exhausted, and officially a shellback. You even get a certificate. And this one make it an unwritten rule and not just a tradition. Rank disappears completely. In 1936, President Franklin Roosevelt crossed the equator aboard the USS Indianapolis. He went through the ceremony like every other pollywog, formally charged with disregard of the traditions of the sea. Even the commander-in-chief answered to Neptune. That's the code. On the open ocean, the sea outranks everyone, and no amount of stars on your collar changes that. There are rules on a carrier that nobody will ever say out loud, but every sailor knows them. They're felt more than spoken, and they might be the most important ones on the ship. The first, watch your shipmate, not their work. Them, if someone starts withdrawing, going quiet, skipping meals, staring at nothing during downtime, you notice. You don't report them like it's an incident. You just show up, ask how they're doing somewhere private, walk them to medical if they'll let you. After tragic incidents aboard the USS George Washington during a long shipyard period, the Navy added more counselors and mental health technicians. But the real first line of defense has always been the sailor sleeping 2 feet away who refuses to look the other way. The second code, own your mistakes, immediately, completely. On a carrier, everyone screws up eventually. The crew doesn't judge you for the mistake, they judge you for what comes after. Admit it, and the whole ship helps you learn. Hide it, blame someone else, make excuses, and trust disappears overnight. On a ship where your life depends on the person next to you, broken trust is a wound that never fully heals. These codes are inherited, passed from one generation of sailors to the next through nothing but experience. Months at sea can hollow a person out. Same steel walls, same faces, same routine grinding forward day after day. The Navy knows this, and so do the sailors. That's why some of the most important unwritten rules on a carrier have nothing to do with combat or safety. They're about staying human. Steel beach picnics happen when the ship hits calm seas and gets a rare window of downtime. Grills come out on the flight deck. Music plays. Sailors eat burgers in the shadow of Super Hornets loaded with missiles, and for a few hours the rigid hierarchy loosens just enough. Chiefs flip burgers next to junior sailors. Officers and enlisted mingle in a way that doesn't happen anywhere else on the ship. Nobody forgets their rank, but everyone remembers they're on the same team. Then there are the spellouts, hundreds of sailors arranging themselves on the flight deck to form words visible from the air, messages like "Happy Birthday, Mom," or tributes to children battling illness. The tradition dates back to 1936 aboard the USS Lexington. Those photos get sent home, families share them, and suddenly a deployment that felt endless feels slightly more bearable. If you strip away the jerseys, the traditions, the ceremonies, the greenie boards, the FOD walks, every unwritten rule on an aircraft carrier traces back to one single code. You never leave a shipmate behind. That applies literally. When someone goes overboard, the entire carrier battle group pivots. Helicopters launch. The ship executes emergency maneuvers. 5,000 people focus on pulling one person out of the water. One sailor in the ocean means everything else stops, but it applies to daily life too. When a family emergency hits back home, the crew covers their duties without being asked. These men and women volunteer to live in a steel box for 9 months, work 18-hour days in the most dangerous workplace on earth, and trust their lives to people they met 6 months ago. The written rules keep the machines running. But it's the unwritten ones, the ones you'll never find in any manual, that bring everyone home. These sailors deserve our respect. If this gave you a new appreciation for carrier life, subscribe, share this with someone, and drop respect in the comments.